most of everybody in here is experienced, and then we have some on Zoom that are brand new. So what I want to do is focus on the changes, the revisions, and then if people are brand new and need more fill in the blank help, then I'll meet individually with you. Is that okay? Okay, I don't see any.
Yes, thank you.
All right, perfect. All right, section A, let me just go over this. These first 5 broker duties are what you would owe to the other party. So if you're writing up this purchase agreement, you're a buyer broker, you owe all A, section A and B to your customer. However, one section A you owe to the other party. So just know that you owe them honesty, reasonable care, and professional and ethical conduct. Hi, Jenny. Okay, moving on to cover page 2. There are several changes on this page. The first being in section 3. Actually, this isn't a change. I just want to point it out. See that little diamond? It says "Where noted, attached Inmar Form 2100." So going down in section 4, and then again in the seller broker disclosures, if you see that little diamond, that would indicate that you need to fill out the 2100. Any questions about that? Transaction coordinator, this is new as of January. You cannot call yourself a transaction coordinator if you are not licensed. So you can call yourself an unlicensed real estate assistant, but you cannot say you're a transaction coordinator. That is just for licensed brokers. Any questions about that? Okay, and then down at the bottom, you're going to have all the buyers sign and then all the sellers sign. Okay, on cover page 3, you're going to fill out the information for yourself. And then if you're in this office, Academy, my license number is 18709. That's on the top of cover page 3. And then you're going to put your license number up there as well. There's somebody, is anybody here from Venturi's? Okay, because that would be a different.
I'm here.
Number. Okay.
This is Mary Bateman.
Hi, Mary. Okay, so for the Venturi office, my license number is 18996.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm on as well, Alice. It's Lisa.
Oh, hi, Lisa. Okay.
How are you?
Yeah. Pat, pardon me? Good point. So former Rio Grande people and people who were over in our other Academy building, my license number over there is 18712. Okay. Actually, I have 6 licenses. As Pat will testify, because she helped me renew them all. I will be forever indebted to her. I would still not have them done if it wasn't for Pat. Which, if any of you are renewing your license and you have questions about the process, Pat has published a book. So Pat White would be your best resource for that. Okay, any questions on cover page 3? All right, now the next page is the index, and I am so grateful for this. I mean, there were times where they changed the purchase agreement so often that the paragraphs change. So now if you have any kind of topic that you need to search, or they put this in here for the buyers and the sellers, but I think it's great for the realtors too. So anything that you need addressed and you're not sure where it is, please come to this index and find it. All right, going on to page 1 of the residential resale. I don't even know how you say that. So, okay, the first thing at the very top, this is a different formatting than what we had before. And I just want to make sure that everybody puts the entire legal name, because the title companies, the lender, everybody's going to take their information from what is on this purchase agreement. So if you know somebody as Bob Sutton, when in actuality, his legal name would be Robert E. Sutton, then you want to put Robert E. Sutton and Jacqueline instead of Jackie. Okay, any questions about that? And make sure you spell their names correctly. I mean, Philip, you've got, it could be one L or two L's. So if it is wrong here, it's going to be wrong on the title binder, on the loan docs, it'll be a disaster. So take the time and make sure you know the correct spelling of their names. One thing they did take out of here, there used to be a line that said the offer date. That would have been the day you're writing up this purchase agreement. That is no longer in here. So, well, I think it was confusing because sometimes people would use the offer date as the date they thought it was executed, but then maybe the seller didn't get around to executing it until another day. So there was always that confusion. So if you didn't put in the days for the actual dates for inspections, people could be counting incorrectly. So I think it was confusing. Clay?
I didn't like it because they had other documents referred to that document. You have to get your correct purchase agreement with that date put on other documents. So that's why I didn't.
Okay. Could everybody on Zoom hear Clay?
No.
Clay, you want to use that mic? And I think you have to push the green button. The green button, if it's not on the top of the microphone. Yeah. There, now you're on.
So I was saying that it was a bummer that you had to reference back to the purchase agreement on multiple documents and get the purchase agreement date. And Amanda says that you still have to do that. And I'm not aware that that you do. I haven't encountered that.
Do you want to use the mic?
On the, well, I'm looking at a general amendment and it still says this amendment is part of the purchase agreement dated whatever.
I would put the date that it's executed. Although if you're doing a date, say you're doing the amendment at the same time you're initially writing the purchase agreement, then it would have to be dated that same day. Right.
Hey, Alice.
Uh-huh. Yes.
So I took Bev Hilton's course earlier this week on the anatomy of a purchase agreement. And she talked about, so the date of the signature stands as the something. And then when the other side receives the offer, that date is considered like the offer date. I mean, there was something that I'm unclear, which is why I'm bringing it up to you. I couldn't recall that the signature date indicated, since we no longer have like the purchase date or whatever it was.
Okay, what I would say is it's an offer until it's been signed by both parties. So at the time the seller has agreed to it, or, you know, depending on the counters, whomever the last one is to sign, once you have agreement, then it becomes an executed document. Did somebody over here have a question? Oh, okay. Okay, any other questions about that? Do you need a purchase agreement?
I do have a question, Alice, when
Okay.
there's time.
Sure.
So my question is on the purchase agreement in general, and I guess this is a theoretical question. If you have a buyer who is not executing on all of the agreements, but the other side is saying that's okay, we'll wait, when do you take an ethical standpoint and say, well, this is enough? That's a scenario I'm dealing with now, but I'm just kind of curious because I know we can't. Our duty is number one to protect our clients, but if they're going to do something that's going to adversely affect the other side, what do you do?
Okay, I guess what in particular have they not signed?
Well, so they've signed everything. They've completely executed the contract, but they're not meeting the requirements. For example, one of the earnest money checks bounced, and now they've totally ghosted, and or will tell me, oh, we're going to have it next week, and next week, and next week, and it just keeps going. But the other side is totally agreeing to the consent that's okay, we'll wait. So I don't know. I'm very confused on it.
Okay, I would say that's not okay. If you have an earnest money check at bounce, that is not a good sign. So I would
Right.
notice to the other party, and just, there is that new document that we have about the deadline defaults. So I would give them that. That gives them 2 days to get it done. Otherwise, it's got to terminate. I mean, earnest money needs to be earnest. And if it's going to bounce, it's not earnest.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't
Thank
think
you,
it's earnest. So, any other questions? Good questions. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, so then this next new section is sole and separate. And I don't know why we haven't had this in here before. We just had an incident with this a couple weeks ago. The wife goes to closing. She is purchasing it by herself. However, she's married, and the husband is off in some kind of boot camp in Texas on a remote island or whatever, and could not close because we did not have that sole and separate. So that is a question to ask everybody at the time you are writing this up. You know, correct, right. And we are a community property state. So if you're married and you're acquiring a property on your own, which is fine, you can do that. However, the other spouse has to sign a sole and separate.
Alice,
Yes,
if they're not sole and separate, can we just leave all that blank?
absolutely.
Okay.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so sole and separate, just read that over. And then for that blank, oh, and then fill in the blank, the date for the settlement / signing date, that's got to be a weekday. And I think Wednesday is a good day, a Wednesday or a Thursday, because then if all parties don't sign that day, then you've got the next day for it to record, and then the people can move on the weekend. So I think Wednesday, probably no later than the 25th or the 26th of the month. After that, the title companies get so busy, mistakes get made. And then at that line about how many days after acceptance, I put in there 10 days because you want to get it done up front. And then the sole and separate would need to be notarized because it's going to have to be recorded. All right, so then your purchase agreement, you're going to, the purchase price, you're going to put in what you're offering. And then here under 2A, you have a choice of either putting in an amount, or you can check the box to be determined. I personally think it's a good idea to put in an amount, because if somebody is, say, buying a $250,000 house and they're putting $100,000 down, I want the listing broker to know this is a strong buyer. So, any questions about that? And then the difference for that third line is the purchase price minus the down payment is going to be your loan amount. Okay, this next section 3 is also a change. It says that the seller shall take the property off the market until termination of this agreement or default by the buyer, which is not waived by the seller, whichever occurs first. So they can still accept backup offers. However, once this document has been signed, it needs to be put into pending. That's our MLS rule. It's got to be put into pending within 48 hours. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, time off market. I'm seeing that a little bit more than what we used to. The amount can be anywhere between, depending on the price of the house. I don't think I've seen it for much more than 500 or 1,000. And I would probably keep it 500 or under. Because sometimes if it's too much money, the seller's going to hope it falls through so he gets to keep the money and move on to somebody else. So we have had that. And then that would need to be a check, and that would be made payable to the seller. And then for that blank, I would say 2 days, no later than 2 days from date of acceptance. Because just like the one that Tony said, if they have not put up, well, that was earnest money, but that would be a concern. If the earnest money bounces, I would probably do the default sooner than later. Right. Okay, so another thing I wanted to mention, we have this new document that's called what's it called? Deadline default. So if the party who is in default, we're sort of doing like a mulligan or a do-over. So if they miss a deadline, and to know which deadlines they are, there are some deadlines that are critical, others aren't as critical. So if you see shall in here, just like on this section 4, where it says the buyer's failure to timely deliver the TOM fee shall be considered a default. If you see shall, then that would mean that you could use that deadline default form. Okay, and there are a lot of shalls in here. Not so many shall nots. Okay, earnest money. If you're going to do a TOM fee, I would not do earnest money until you've had the inspections and you've got approval by the inspections before you do the earnest money. I've seen some that they check the time off market, the TOM fee, at the same time they do earnest money. But the reason for the TOM fee is to avoid hassles with getting earnest money back. So I would say on that one, maybe put down 500 or 1,000. Well, I would say probably $1,000. And then it's, you would want to say, if you're using the TOM fee, you're going to be doing it if the buyer has no objections to the inspections, you're going to check that box. If you're not doing TOM fee, then you're going to want to do it within probably 2 days from the date of acceptance. Am I going too fast? Is it okay with everybody? Okay, perfect. Any questions on that? So, Tom. Right, TOM fee, once you write the check to the seller, it belongs to the seller. He can go to dinner at, you know, the Season restaurant. He can do whatever he wants with that money. It is now his, right? Okay, any other questions about TOM earnest money? Another thing, you don't absolutely have to have earnest money. So that would create fewer hassles. I mean, most of what we deal with are earnest money disputes where the purchase agreement may be very, very clear that it goes back to the buyer, and then the seller will say, well, you know, I took my house off the market for a week and a half and, you know, I should be compensated for that. So it becomes a hassle. By then, nobody likes anybody. So yeah, TOM, as I say, I'm seeing that more often than not. Although I will tell you, some of the realtors out there don't know what to do with TOM fee. We've had some people say, well, I just ignored your offer because it had TOM fee associated and I didn't know what to do with it. So yes. No, typically the TOM fee is, no. Jenny's question was there ever a time on the purchase agreement where the TOM fee would not be delivered until after inspections? So the reason we have the TOM fee is, one, because we were having a lot of arguments over earnest money, and it allows the seller, he can take his house off the market to have the inspections. So I think the TOM fee is a good thing. So, all right, any other questions? A good one, Jenny, thanks.
I have one, Alice.
Okay.
Still, hey, if the inspections are going to take a long time, like let's say the pest inspection is out a month, and you're wanting to make sure that the seller is protected with the TOM fee, can it be more, $1,000, $1,200 that would cover what their mortgage cost would be, or is that just way out of line?
Well, I'm hesitant to see. I mean, it depends on the situation. If the buyer is willing to do that, because once it's given to the seller, it's gone. The buyer's not going to get it back. So I guess my concern would be, what if he gives that seller $1,200 and then he does the inspections and the inspections come out really badly? So now the buyer has invested $1,200 of the TOM fee he's not going to see back, plus probably another $600 with inspections to walk away.
Yeah, that is a lot for the buyer, but at the same time, the seller is going to be out if the buyer walks.
I would agree, right? I don't know, does anybody else have an opinion on that? Pat? Let's find a mic for you.
So I didn't accept it, but I had a realtor ask me, wanting in their offer, wanting the Tom fee back upon successful closing. And I said no.
I mean, they can always ask, but I would probably say no also.
Okay.
Because it's, yeah, I mean, I think you're putting the seller out a little bit. If, you know, but he's taking it off the market for those inspections. So I think the seller should be able to keep it. So, yeah. Joseph, do you want a copy of the purchase agreement? Oh. No, no. So with earnest money, you're giving credit at closing toward that amount. The Tom fee, that goes directly to the seller, and it does, you're not, the buyer's not credited toward the purchase price.
Yeah. Alice, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Uh-huh.
Alice, I have a question. You just said, if you do a Tom fee, you don't think we should do an earnest money deposit necessarily until after inspections. But in this market, and as crazy as this market has been, do you think that's wise?
Well, I would say don't, I guess my comment was don't do both at the same time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you're going to do a Tom fee, I would say don't have the earnest money come into play until after you have the results of those inspections.
Even
Or
if
just do earnest money and don't do the Tom fee.
interesting. Okay, I haven't seen that. I've seen both, but I've never seen just a Tom fee and no earnest money.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, I'm not saying don't do earnest money. I'm just saying don't put them both at the same time.
Yeah.
Wait.
And your thinking is because you might not get it back because of inspections?
No, I
Is it
just,
faulty?
the reason for the Tom fee is to get inspections. So
Right.
if you're putting up a Tom fee, I would not, and the reason we are doing Tom fee is so we don't have so many hassles about earnest money. So I would say, if you're doing the Tom fee, then do the earnest money once everybody's satisfied with the inspections.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So then it is going to be going off the market. It's going to be put in pending, and that's our MLS rules that within 48 hours, it does go into pending, but they can't accept backup offers. So, and it used to be that you could only accept one backup offer. Now you can accept more than one. You just have to label them 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if the original purchase agreement falls off, then you have to go to backup offer number 1. You can't, maybe 2, backup offer 2 is better than backup offer number 1. You can't jump over 1 to go to 2. You have to do them in the order that they were written. Okay. All right, so then down at earnest money, we talked about that. The description is from MLS. And then the gross receipts code, if it is in Albuquerque, that last line on the bottom of page 1 is 02-100. And then you're going to have your buyers or your seller's initial at the bottom of each page. Any questions about page 1?
I do have a question. You were just talking about the acceptance on that, but each of those has to, it would be in your seller's order, right? You would present them all and they would have to sign each one of those in that order, right?
For the backup offers?
Yes.
Yes, right, yeah.
Okay.
And then
Just wanted
you
to
need to
clarify.
let the other broker know what number they are, because when the buyer's broker is giving you a backup, they may think they're the first, when in actuality, they may be the second or the third. So you have to let the other party know, because when they do the backup offer, at the top, they're going to say backup offer number 1, when in actuality, it may be 2 or 3. So then you're going to need to do an amendment or a counter saying, no, you're not backup offer number 1, you're backup offer number 2.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you don't have to take backup offers. That's something you need to discuss with your seller and see if that's something he wants to do. All right, any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to page 2.
Well, Alice, isn't that
Yeah.
part of the list, that backup offer is part of the listing agreement, as I recall? It asks if you want to take, if you want any
Right.
backup
It
offers.
does.
Yeah,
And then also, I would not, there's that other box where on the listing agreement where it says you can either share the existence or the terms of other offers. I would always check on the listing agreement, the existence. You don't
that's
want to
right.
be telling
I always do that.
somebody what the terms are of other offers. Clay,
So if I don't check terms on that, then I can't tell somebody that I have a strong offer. Is that correct?
well, right. I think it'd be okay because that's sort of,
Mhm.
you know,
Because usually I
nebulous.
tell people, I say in my listings, I say that we're gonna do the terms, but I'm gonna say the terms by, well, it's over list, or it's a very strong offer, or we're on the market one day and we've got 2 offers, or, you know, these type of things. I'm not gonna say a number.
Right.
But I'm probably gonna, you know, put a weight.
No, that's
to the
okay.
offer,
Right.
So I don't have to say terms when I put a weight to the offer.
No, if you say I have 2 strong offers, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as, you know, saying over list, I mean, that may, you're still not giving a definitive number. So. Right. Correct. Yes. Yeah. So what Jenny was saying, if you mark terms on the listing agreement, you could say, yes, it's over list. The offer. Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay, then talking about fixtures, this is probably one of the areas where we have the most disagreements. And Jackie, you want to talk about the one you just had? Jackie Staton. Oh, she's off. Tim, you want to talk about it? Oh, let me get you a mic.
I'm on it.
We recently had a buyer. We recently had a buyer who did his walkthrough, got into the house, and realized the curtains were gone, the rods were gone, the TV mount pieces were missing. There were a whole number of things that were a problem. So we got back and had to get all those things returned or offset with the credit. Well, title really didn't need to be involved in that sense, as long as you have an agreement between the buyer and the seller and how to deal with it. That's why I have title involved at all.
What Clay was just saying was that he had a
Can't hear that.
situation where the seller held over after closing and then took some items with them. And at that point, the title company is not going to do anything. It needs to be negotiated. On this one, the curtains and draperies were fairly expensive. They were like, they think maybe worth $10,000. So there was an amendment that said either the seller would give the buyer $10,000 or they would return. They actually had boxed up the draperies and the rods and everything. So they said they would have to return the drapes and rods within, say, 7 days or something. Clay, do you want to give him the mic?
We had $1,000 held at title, and title wouldn't distribute distribute the $1,000 check to my client. And so I don't know, man. That one's, be really careful with that one.
Okay, well, this one, did you get the drapes? Okay, so on that one, and here is something, I mean, ironically, with this particular one, the listing broker is here under my license, as is the buyer broker. So I mean, the words that people think in their minds are, you know, they were looking them up in the dictionary and that kind of thing. But when you look at the fixtures on that bullet point about number 6, in that first left-hand column, it says attached window coverings and rods, not including curtains unless otherwise indicated below. And they had checked down below, they had checked unattached window coverings. So then the question became, on the window itself were blinds. So the seller was interpreting that, okay, those are window coverings. And then these drapes were just sort of like a decorative thing that didn't really cover the window. So, I mean, it gets into a matter of semantics and a pissing contest. So, yeah. Okay, so that one is getting resolved. But I would say most of these issues are going to be with things that the seller takes and they think they're well within the right to take it, and the buyer makes the assumption that it's going to stay. So,
Alice, you know what they don't have on here that they did? And I ran into that a couple of years ago, is when a TV is hooked to the wall and you have a bracket holding it so it can maybe turn one way or the other. And it used to have on personal property, that is personal property. And is the TV, you know, if they take it down, they have to repair the wall and paint it?
right, so if you look over at the far right column, under the pictures, it talks about TV wall mounts.
Where do you see that?
Okay, can everybody get there? So
It used
last
to.
column, the last item, it says TV wall mounts, not including TVs unless otherwise indicated below.
So that's
So
new.
that you would want to check that the TVs do stay. And this is one thing to keep in mind is if MLS says, yes, the 4 refrigerators stay, or that the TV stay, the fact that it's in MLS does not ensure that those will stay. You have to check the box. Because sometimes people say, well, in MLS, it said this, but then the seller was like, well, I didn't get as much money as I thought I should, so I took them. So if you expect an item to stay, you've got to check it here for personal property. Okay, and then, yeah, I guess it's in big bold under the II, the personal property. It says personal property listed in MLS listing is not included in this purchase agreement unless included below. So don't assume because it's in MLS that it's going to be there. All right, and then some of the changes that were made in the personal property, they now have unattached window coverings. That's the first change. Then they separated audio and video. They did just have one item. Now they have audio and video. And then there's also an issue with refrigerators. So there's the refrigerator that's in the kitchen, and then there may be a refrigerator in the garage or a wine refrigerator or something like that. So you want to check off all the refrigerators if you expect those to stay. Yes. I don't know. That's sort of the agreement. That was sort of the argument that was involved. And I did send an email to Ashley last night telling her about this situation, Ashley Strauss-Martin, just to see what she says. Yeah. So, okay. And then dropping down to garage door remotes. If you're representing the buyer, then you're going to put in the number that you want to stay. So if you don't put that in, then the default is 1 garage door remote. Jenny. Here's the.
If the buyer puts in they want 4 and they only have 2, is the seller buying 2 more unless you counter that?
Yes, you would have to counter it. Yeah, so Jenny's question, if you didn't hear it, was if the buyer asks for 4 garage remotes and there are only 2, if that is not countered, then the seller is going to be buying 2 more remotes. Okay, so as I say, the default is 1. So if the buyer wants 2, then you're going to need to write that number in. And if you're representing the seller, you want to be sure and check that to make sure that the seller actually has the action number that's in here. Okay, over in this far right-hand column, the unattached fireplace grate. If you want that to stay, you need to check that box. Also, if the fireplace screen is unattached, here again, you would check if the buyer wants that. Pool and small equipment, including any mechanical or other cleaning systems. Has anybody had a major problem with pool equipment? Because I think typically, a lot of times they're not moving to another house with a pool. So I don't know that that's a huge issue. Okay, and then down below in bold, anything that's in bold in this contract is because there's been some kind of lawsuit. That's why this is 16 pages long, because there have been many lawsuits. But if the property contains more than one of any item checked, all of those items present at the time of the buyer's offer shall remain unless otherwise excluded. So what I tell people, if that's an antique chandelier, seller, take it down before anybody sees it. Okay, and then you're going to have buyer and seller initial at the bottom. Are there any questions? Oh, let me just mention one other thing on the fixtures. Solar panels. This is like, ugh, I hate solar panels that are leased. So what it says is under fixtures, that's on DI. It says, unless otherwise excluded herein, the property shall include all fixtures free of all liens. If there are solar panels that are leased, they are not free of liens. So it can kill more deals than anything I've seen. Joseph's over there shaking his head. Yes, yeah. Clay has a comment.
Has everybody encountered that the buyers are having to pay off the solar panels before they can purchase the home? Has that happened to anybody?
The seller or the buyer?
The buyer has to pay off the solar panels before they can purchase the home through the lease, or it was they couldn't qualify for the lease, but they could qualify for the property. They had the cash, so they had to pay off the solar panels prior to moving into the property. Does anybody else ever encounter that?
Joseph's oh, no. Okay. Okay. Well, on one point, Jason Pike said that the buyer had fully qualified for the PITI. It was going to closing, and whomever the owner was of the Vivint or whomever who owned the lease turned down the buyer. So this was like a couple days before closing. The seller thought they were moving, the buyer thought they were moving in, and the solar company said, sorry, you don't have the money, which I guess would be similar to what you were saying, Clay, that the buyer could not qualify for the lease, the solar lease, and the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So in this case, the buyer had to pay it off. I mean, most buyers are not going to have that kind of money. I've seen where the payoff is like $32,000, $25,000, and the buyer paid it off. Jeez.
We'll talk about that one on red flags on Wednesday, right, Alice?
Oh yeah, okay, write that down, Tigo.
Well, that's definitely a red flag. You got solar on a roof? That's a red flag. You better start doing some digging and figure out what you're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, I was just going to share with you, I do have a listing that does have solar, and it's with Tesla. So I called them because obviously one of the snafus is that the new buyer has to qualify under their credit conditions. Tesla just 2 weeks ago removed that. They no longer require that the buyer take over the credit conditions. They can just assume it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, that is good. Yeah, I think they're probably one of the few. Amy, did you say it was Tesla?
Yes, it was Tesla.
So with Tesla, that's who has the existing lease. They're saying that the buyer doesn't have to qualify for that lease.
Correct. And prior to that, they actually had a stipulation that even if the buyer did not qualify, they could just make a one-time fee of $250 and that would suffice.
Oh. So yeah.
Alice, this is
Hassan.
Alice, this is Lisa. With regards to the solar, so should we, in our counter offers, if we have the list, we have the seller, put a stipulation in there that buyer has to have proof of qualification for the lease, approving them for the lease of that solar prior to taking it off the market or prior to accepting the offer?
I don't know. I think I would give them a couple days after acceptance to get that done. Because truly.
Yeah, but put a time frame in there, like 4
put a
days.
time frame. I don't know that I would not accept the offer based on that, because some of these companies, people call numerous times and no matter, you can talk to 4 different people and get 4 different answers. So it's so frustrating that they could talk to somebody and they could say, yeah, you qualify. And then 4 weeks later, no, they don't qualify. So I don't know how much credibility we can put in the answers they get from those solar companies. What I would do, if you do have a lease system, I would put those documents in MLS so people can read them over. And I don't think we can overstate that it is a lease system. Because sometimes people think they know what it is. And then I don't even know what does anybody have a percentage of leased? Joseph, have you had situations? What I see mostly, but mine's jaded because I only hear about them when they go badly. So I would say 0 go through, but I don't know.
I actually, it's Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, and I'm driving. Sorry, I hope you can hear me. I actually had a really smooth, very easy transaction with a Vivint power purchase agreement in Rio Rancho. It went smooth as silk. On time closing, everything went well. The seller could not, they still owed, they were only like 3 years into it. And so they couldn't have even taken it off if they wanted to. The buyer would have had to done something, or, the seller didn't have the money to do it. So, but they accepted it. The buyers qualified. The lender, if I remember correctly, the lender actually, helped hold the buyer's hand through the process of getting the lease approved. So through Vivint, it went well.
Okay, that's good.
We've had our fair share of them who just went smooth, no problem. The key is just like anything: communication, over communication, telling them again, making sure everybody knows what's going on. I know this is not what we're talking about today, but it's just like anything, right? It's over communicating, over disclosing, and as long as everybody knows what they're dealing with, the problem is they blow up when you're a week before closing, and all of a sudden they go, "We got to do what?" And it costs how much? Yeah.
And you have to allow plenty of time for that solar company to get back with you. I mean, because that was a frustration. We had one that I think we had the buyer, the objection period was missed because I think it was Vivint, didn't get back with them. And the seller said, well, sorry, you missed your objection deadline. So silence deems acceptance, but it really wasn't the buyer's fault. It was Vivint's. So anyway, just be proactive, I think, is a key thing to know here when you're dealing with solar leases. And if they're already paid for, I think Bob had one where your seller up there off Tramway paid it off before closing. 35,000. Did everybody hear Bob? This was another Tesla one where Bob's seller had to pay $35,000 to pay off the lease, and then had to put a new roof on as well. Yeah. Right. So, okay. Any questions about page number 2? All right, let's move on to number 3. And on this one of the changes is up. Oh, is there a question up there? Tigo? No. Okay. Okay. On number 7, cash. This is a new revision to this particular February form. They want to know from where the money is coming. You would not believe the times that we've had somebody say they're buying the house cash, and either the buyer broker thought they were going to do a slick one. They knew that the buyer had to sell their house, and they said, you know, they thought, we actually had a realtor say, well, we didn't want to say it was contingent upon the sale of their house because you wouldn't take it. It's like, no, we wouldn't. I know. This is like, sometimes you just want to hit your head against the wall.
Alice, is there any consequences or accountabilities for agents that do that?
Amy, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any consequences or accountability for agents that do that type of thing?
I wish there was, but I don't know of any. So just now, I think I think probably there have been so many issues that's why they've got these boxes. So readily available would mean that they can go to the bank and write a cashier's check, and that money is solid money. You can take it out. If it's contingent upon the sale of their existing house, then that's where you write that in there. So, yes.
Can that contingent on the closing of a cash out refinance box? That could be like another property that they own that they're just refinancing and taking the equity out of it and using it, like it could be a rental that they have.
Right.
So that's not necessarily contingent upon the sale of their primary residence. Is that correct?
I think when it's a contingency, if you're representing the buyer, you don't have to do the two forms, the first right of refusal or the contingency form. But I would say that's not cash. If they need the money from another property, whether it's their primary residence or it's a rental, then you would need to check that box.
Alice.
Yes.
So just to be clear, when they're cashing out retirement stocks or funds, do we check other and then just write in? Or is that considered cash readily available? What if it takes weeks for their money to be moved?
I think if it takes weeks, then I would say, yeah, I would mention that. I mean, say it's in a Merrill Lynch account and it's just a matter of a transfer, it's going to take 3 days, that's one thing. But if it's something where they're cashing out their 401 or something else where it's going to take a long time, then we need to know that. Okay, any other questions about cash?
I actually do have a question about cash. I currently have a buyer who is, every deal she's out of about 15 deals has offered cash. And then we have found out through the process that she's going to different banks and liquidating assets. And so if we've written the offer up as cash and we find out, should we change the offer to financing? Or it's very strange. So like if there's investors is what her thing is that she's getting the cash from investors.
Yes. Yeah, because to me, that is misleading. If the broker took the offer because they thought it was a cash transaction, I mean, right now, cash is talking. If you've got 6 offers and 1 or 2 of them are cash, the cash offer is typically getting it. So you may have gotten that offer because they thought it was cash, no appraisal, et cetera, et cetera. So if she truly is getting financing, then you're going to need to check one of those boxes, and you should definitely let the other broker know.
Alice?
Yes.
I've been doing quite a bit of cash lately, and whether I'm listing it or I'm selling it, if I'm listing in the MLS, I say all offers must be presented with verification of funds if it is cash. That is, I require that. And if I represent the buyer, on the other hand, I come in with verification of funds right away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no playing games here. It's just, it's there, or you don't
I
have
agree.
it.
So that's the way it should be. And also, say they're buying a $500,000 house and they have $750,000 in cash. Don't show the listing broker that they have $750,000.
No.
Only show them that they have $500,000.
Yeah, and you usually get a letter from Merrill Lynch saying that they have enough to close at this price point.
Right.
Is what I do anyway.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a great idea. So, and then keep in mind that the seller has to approve where that cash is coming from. So say it's in a Merrill Lynch account, that's easy to prove. But we had one buyer who on one day his Bank of America account had $25, and then the next day, you know, it said it was $1 million, and it wasn't even, you know, I think they typed in Bank of America, so it was not legitimate. So be really careful when you look at these verification of funds. And I would even probably call the lender just to verify. Now, all you know is, yes, on this day, they have 500,000. There's nothing to say after you give that commitment that there's going to be that amount of money in it, you know, a week from now. But that's all we can do is, yes, as of today, there is 500,000 in that account. Okay, any other questions? All right, so cash, we love cash right now. So Meryl, I think that's a great idea to have it up. And that also would help you if you're in competition with other cash buyers, then you're going to have a leg up because you've already got that verification. So, okay, that's very smart. All right, so then filling in the blank on 7A, where it says no later than, I put in 3 days after date of acceptance. Sometimes people are here from out of town and they got to go back and switch funds. So within 3 days, they need to show that they have the funds necessary. Here again, we've got a shall in there. Failure of the buyer to timely deliver proof of funds shall be considered a default. And then you've got that other box, earnest money, if delivered, either shall or shall not be refunded to the buyer. I think most of what we see is it shall be refunded. And then dropping down to loans, in that section BII, buyer shall provide seller with a pre-qualification letter from the lender no later than 2 days after date of acceptance. If you don't have a pre-qual letter when you present that offer, you're going to lose. So just make a habit. I would get them pre-qualified before you even put them in your car to show them houses. Yeah, so.
And should we be doing the proof of fund letters as well before we present offers?
The what?
Given the market?
Proof of
That's
funds?
the same thing. If somebody comes out and says, well, I'm going to pay cash, should you get the proof of funds letter before you present the offer?
Absolutely. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and in the case where with your buyer, Tony, where you know you said cash and she was going to get investors, to me that's not a cash deal. Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't aware of that until later on in the contract, but it was kind of, like you said, misleading to me in the beginning. Now it's a different scenario. So,
well, it's misleading to the seller and the selling broker, the listing broker. Yeah. So, I mean, we've got to be truthful in this stuff. And by asking this question now, I mean, that's the question to ask. Are your funds ready that you could get them today or maybe a couple days? Or, you know, do you have to go, because if they have to go to a bank, whether it's an investor or somebody else, that's not cash. So.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then pre-qualification letter, if you're dealing with one of our lenders, they should know these 4 items that need to be covered in the pre-qual letter, but just make sure that your pre-qualification letter does include A, B, C, and D. All right, any questions about that? Because if a seller has a couple offers and one is a better pre-qual letter than another one, you may lose out because the seller or the seller's broker does not know this company or they've had a bad experience with them. I know with Dorothea's, I don't know if Dorothea's on here, she had 18 offers on her listing, and on one of them it was Wells Fargo, and it's like, so when we were looking at those offers, we was like, okay, yeah, we don't know this lender, we're gonna, you know, take it out because of that. Or, I mean, it gets down to the point where with the other realtor, if you've had a bad experience with another realtor, it's like, you know, you have the ability to sort of steer the seller away from that. Pat?
Even when I'm having a cash deal, I want the proof of funds from the other realtor from a financial institution. Because I've had a realtor just give me a snapshot the guy took of this bank statement to show me that the funds are there. I said, no, I need a letter from the institution that says the funds are there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And if it's a company that you've never heard of, be really, really careful. Also with some out-of-state lenders, they work on they march to their own drum. So it's just like, we need to close. I mean, we've had situations where it's the day of closing and we still don't have, we still don't know that the loan has been approved. So if you're representing the seller, you're really in the driver's seat now. You can pick and choose. That's what our market is as of the moment. All right, dropping down to the, if we just also had this happen this week, that BIII, we had a situation where we had the seller went to closing, and then they said, well, there's an issue with the appraisal, and you're going to have to sign this other document. So our listing broker called the lender, and we find out at some point during the transaction, the buyer went from conventional to FHA and didn't tell us. So not only did they go from conventional to FHA, Nick's smiling back here, that the purchase price was $300,000. The conventional appraisal was $300,000. The same appraiser went out, did the FHA appraisal. It came in at $278,000, $22,000 less. And our, pardon me? The same appraiser. I don't know. But I mean, our poor seller thought he was closing, and then suddenly he finds out that at some point, and then the other broker, who's with another company, will remain nameless, said, well, we didn't change lenders, so we didn't have to tell you that it went from conventional to FHA. It's like, au contraire. The purchase agreement says that if you change lenders or if you change programs, you have got to let us know within 2 days. So now that buyer wants to keep their earnest money. It's like, I don't think so. So anyway. All right, so it's very critical. If you're changing lenders, you've got to let the other party know within 2 days, or if you're changing loan programs, you've got to let the other side know. All right, let's see, dropping down to section V. In the event the lender determines the buyer will not qualify for a loan by the settlement/signing date, the buyer shall deliver to the seller a written rejection letter from the lender. So the default here is 3 days. So if you want it other than 3 days, you're going to fill in that blank. I would not make it any shorter time than 3 days. But on this one, our seller went to closing last week. Yesterday, we got this lame rejection letter. So anyway. All right, any questions about that? All right, on this particular one, the opportunity to cure does not apply to this section. So you can't have a do-over or that deadline default form. This is one that does not apply. Oh, actually it's in there, that 4 lines from the bottom, it says buyer shall not be afforded an opportunity to cure if the buyer fails to timely deliver a rejection letter, which is exactly what we have in this situation. And our poor seller, you know, he wants not only the $1,000 earnest money, he feels like he's been harmed. And then they put the house back on the market, and he took less. He ended up taking less money the second time. So, you know, it's like, you better give your $1,000 to us, or the seller could potentially sue you. So it's gonna get worse. Right. Okay, any questions about page 3? All right, this next page, they've made boxes. So this is new. Over at 9B, they've got a little box that says buyer. So they've made that, and anytime there's a box, I would say make sure that you have your party sign it, whether it's the buyer or the seller. And then up at the top, that box where it says important, broker is not responsible for verifying the authenticity or veracity of the pre-qual or the proof of funds. So, I mean, we can say that, yes, this came from a lender, but they can't come back on us and say, well, you said this, and it's not the case. So there are two types of contingencies. One is if the buyer's home is presently under contract, that's when you're going to use the 2503A, or if it's not on the market yet, or it's not under contract, then you're going to use the 2503. Any questions about that? So there are the two. In this market, it's very tough to get a house under contract if they have not put their house on the market. So somebody said what they suggested is that the buyer put their house on the market, move into someplace temporarily before they made the offer. But my concern would be there aren't that many houses on the market. This week, I think we were down to 600 and something for the entire Albuquerque area. So I would be hesitant to say, put your house on the market, move in someplace temporarily, and then hopefully find the right house.
690.
What? Higo?
690.
690 homes.
I told somebody this morning, I said, to put that in perspective, if we had 4,000 to 5,000 homes on the market, we'd still just be at a balanced market.
Yeah. So, and then we had somebody that wanted to back out on, actually Tigo is real aware of this one, as is Lisa. We had the buyer, and another office had the seller, and it went to closing. And then the seller said, oh, I can't find a house that I like in Atlanta, so therefore I'm going to terminate the sale. And I have 72 hours after closing to terminate. And it's like, I don't know what you're smoking, but that is not the case. So that has been a real hassle. I mean, that lady finally, this closed on March 1st. The buyer was very generous to let the seller stay in until March 8th. But then there was on that seller holdover, it said if she didn't get out by March 8th, then the fee was going to go from $46 to $138. So she just moved out yesterday. But that was, you know, the seller got an attorney, the buyer got an attorney. It was ugly. Did somebody, Lisa, did you have a question? Okay. Okay, so yeah, make sure. I mean, that was a new one on me. I'd never had somebody say, oh, I'm not going to. I said, the house isn't even hers anymore. The title has changed. And she decided because she couldn't find a house in Atlanta, she wasn't going to move. So anyway, as of last night.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Lisa. Hi. Yeah, just to kind of back up to the house being on the market. It's not about what you were just talking about, but kind of relevant. So what I've suggested to my clients is that we get their house ready. We get all the pictures taken. We get everything done. I get everything in the MLS ready to go. And then when we find the property, like it's ready, it's in incomplete status, but it's ready to go. And then we find the property, we can go ahead and put it on the market, like hit the button. And so, you know, I think that's one way to deal with it, because you know they're not going to get it if it's not on the market. They're not likely to get it even if it's on the market, not yet under contract, but it's a little closer. So
yeah, that's a good idea.
Do you know what I'm saying? Can you hear me?
Yes. No, I think that's a good idea.
I think I lost you.
No, we hear you. Yeah. We hear you. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. So then moving on, I want to mention, this is very critical in 9E, the square footage. It says the appraisal contingency does not allow for termination based on a discrepancy between representation or assumptions about the square footage and the square footage as indicated in the appraisal. So what this is saying is if the house appraises, okay, so maybe they advertise the house as 2,000 square feet. then the appraiser goes out and we find out it's only 1,500 square feet. If that house appraises at the purchase price, that buyer's moving ahead. And we've had buyers that say, well, I thought I was buying this for 120 a square foot and now I'm really paying 132, too bad. So they need to know if square footage is relevant to that buyer, they need to make that one of their inspections. They can't wait till they do the appraisal to find out that the square footage has changed. Because we did have one recently, it was like 700 square feet smaller. So, yeah. Okay, any questions about appraisals? We are having them come in low. Here again, I don't know if I just heard bad ones, but they're coming in $20,000, $30,000 less. Yeah. All right, moving down.
Alice, I think you're only hearing bad ones.
Okay,
Because
good.
I have gotten offers 30,000, 40,000 over my list price, and they've all come in.
Wow.
Yeah.
We need to get your appraiser.
And you know, the lender picks it. We have no choice.
No, I know. I was just trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, settlement date, as I say, I think it's good to pick a Wednesday or Thursday so the buyer can move in over the weekend, and don't make it at the very, very end of the month. Everybody's busy and mistakes get made. And then, yeah, dropping down to the funding date, that says on or before. So if you have, let's see, today's March 20th. What is today? 19th. Okay, so this is a Friday. That's a bad example. So if you're going to close yesterday, March 18th, and then the next one, you're going to say March 19th, if you're representing the buyer. However, if the buyer and seller close and it records yesterday, then the buyer's going to be expecting to move in. So that has been creating some problems as well. So keep that in mind if you're representing the seller. It says on or before. So it could potentially happen in the same day. All right, any questions about page 4? All right, page 5. I think most of the time what we're seeing for possession is that it's at the time the funding date requirements are satisfied. So most of you, or probably all of you, know I hate to see buyers move in early and I hate to see sellers hold over. It is a train wreck. So never comes out well. All right. Pardon me? Okay. And then dropping down to paragraph 13, they've added assessments to this paragraph with the examination of title, liens, and assessments. So we've got it highlighted every time they mention assessments. And then going down to II, it says the buyer may choose to close subject to assessments or to terminate this agreement. If the buyer chooses to close, the current installment of assessments shall be prorated through settlement/signing date, and the buyer shall assume future installments. So you got to make sure people know that if it's maybe it's in a new area and people are still paying, or even like over in that area off Wandabo where there's a bridge, that's a PID. Make sure that they know that and they're going to be paying that over and above their monthly payment. So if the buyer timely terminates, any earnest money shall be delivered back to the buyer. So then I put in there for B, to issue a title commitment at least 15 days. And then what we're having, not so much here in Albuquerque, but in other parts of the state, and Bill, you could answer this. He had one title company that I think took like, how many months was that, Bill, to get a title binder from that company down in Pytown?
It was probably 3 months.
Yeah, right. So if you've got a section, you've got something like that going on, then this part's new. They've added 5 days prior to settlement date, but I would want to get that binder prior to 5 days just to make sure that everything is proper on it. We had, well, no, I guess that was a listing package. What they did on the listing package was that they ran the property and the property didn't have an issue. They didn't run the seller and the seller had major liens. So be careful with that. That just happened this week. So 5 days for the extension, and then it can be extended up to X number of days. Yes. Yes.
Don't exceed the seller's lien deal check.
Correct. So what Clay just asked, he said if there are liens that exceed the purchase price or they exceed, the purchase price, then you are dead in the water. You cannot, the seller, unless he gets, right, unless he gets a gift from somebody, then your deal is going to die. Okay. All right, so just read over this. This whole section is new about the 14-day automatic extension. And back in December and January, our local title companies were having a hard time getting title binders out in a timely manner. But does anybody know now? Has that improved? Bob or Tim or Jenny? Okay, so people in the room are saying there haven't been any problems with getting title binders out. So that's good. So, and I think part of it was there were so many people refinancing that was taking a lot of their time to do title binders for the refis. And it was clogging up the system. So, Jim. For the one I put in 15 days, that first blank, and then 5 days extended up to, so automatically extended. Well, the max is going to be 14 days. So if you don't want us to go 14 days, then maybe you say like 10 days. But I don't think this is an issue here in Albuquerque right now. It's in other parts of the state. Okay, any questions about page 5? On page 6, we just have to keep in mind that these prorations should be handled by the buyer and the seller and not the title company. Out in the East Mountain area where you have a propane tank, then you're going to have the amount of propane measured just to see, and that would be a credit from the seller, I'm sorry, from the buyer to the seller. So if you've got a full propane tank, that could potentially be like $1,200 that the buyer would have to reimburse the seller. So you want to make sure to get that measured and make sure that the buyer has that amount of money to reimburse the seller. Can somebody hand the mic to Jenny?
We have very fluctuating prices for propane. So what you pay for propane in the winter might be different than what you're paying in the spring and summer when it sells. So is that like, do they need a receipt from the time they filled it, or do they need just per price per gallon of propane?
It would be what the price is today.
Today.
Right, yeah. Okay, any questions
Who measures that, Alice?
Yeah, I think they put a stick. Does somebody know more? Oh, okay. Jenny said there's a dial on it that tells you how much it is.
Oh.
How much is
Yeah, what I've done in the past is I just go and I take a picture of the gauge, the gauge on the propane tank. I have contacted the propane, and now I know how much is in there and how much what the value is. So,
okay, yeah. That can be a substantial amount of money. So you want to make sure, and the title company is not going to do that for you. You have to do that. Tony, did you have a question?
Well, I was just a comment on that. I live in the East Mountains and I go on propane, and it depends on the propane company, because some of them will actually have they put a special, it's an electronic tool that gives them more precise, because they have warned, but both propane companies have warned me, sometimes those meters read inaccurate. So if the propane company has it's a new device, I can't remember the name of the device, but it measures it more accurately, and it's an app on the phone that the customer gets. So that might be an option as well.
Okay, thanks. Bob?
The reason you want to have the propane company do it is to remove the liability from the broker who said it had so many gallons of propane in the tank, and then the people come and fill it, and it doesn't match up to what it should be, and then they realize they've been taken advantage of, and not meant to be, but just inadvertently measured the wrong thing. So let the company do it, let them tell you what the value is, and then you're done with it.
Okay, and I don't know if there's a charge for the company to come out and do, no, Jenny
No,
is saying
they'll
there's
do
no
it
charge.
because they want you as a customer. So they're happy to break the ground and know that you're going to use their service. So
Exactly. On the East Mountain and in Placitas, I've done the exact same thing. I've always had the company come out that services the propane tank.
Okay.
Takes
Also, you
the,
want to make sure that the propane tank, you know the status. It could be either owned or leased. So that's critical to know. If it's owned, it would transfer. If it's leased, then you're going to need to do something with that propane company. All right, so on this page 6, the changes are over on the right-hand side. They've added prior title policy retrieval fee. So what this is it's, I don't think anybody's, although Fidelity, I think Fidelity may be charging this, or a title policy cancellation fee. This is mostly in other parts of the state. Oh, the title companies here haven't been, although I did hear, has anybody heard that Fidelity is charging a fee? Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so what Tim just said is that they use Fidelity, and Fidelity said we're not charging the fee. So this doesn't apply as much, but I would go ahead and check a box. So we don't have the controversy who's going to pay it. So I would put buyer or seller, have it checked that somebody's going to pay for it.
Alice, what is the prior title policy retrieval fee? I'm not familiar with that at all.
Well, what happens is if maybe one title company there's a buyer and they've done a binder, they've incurred costs, and then that transaction falls through, and another purchase agreement comes along and they want to use a different title company.
Got it, thank you.
So the first title company is going to say, hey, we put work into this, we want to be reimbursed for our work.
Got it.
Amanda? No, because it's not being charged that much, but they could. So, all right, dropping down to elevation under miscellaneous. This elevation certificate is a new change. As is, they've also put the home warranty plan that moved from the home warranty paragraph to this. So they just want to make sure that you have that discussion with the buyer and say, yes, you're going to get a home warranty. I would always recommend people get a home warranty. I mean, that puts somebody else between you and that call on Christmas morning when they don't have any heat. Jenny? Sure. Jenny asked to go over what the elevation certificate is. In some areas of, not so much Albuquerque, but down by Las Lunas or Berlin, the land could be close to the river. And if it's close to where it could potentially flood, then you need to get an elevation certificate to say, yes, this is above the river level, or that you may have to get additional flood insurance. So primarily it's related to flood insurance.
Can I give a plug to Remind on that, Alice? So if you've got a property and you're curious, if you use Remind, there's a great FEMA map overlay in that, where you can see if it falls into the FEMA zone.
Perfect. So Tigo was just saying Remind as a FEMA overlay. So thank you, Tigo. That's good to know. Okay, and then the homeowner plan, as I say, I think you should always encourage your buyer to purchase a home warranty plan. I know Siobhan, I don't know if you're on here, but she buys it for her buyers, which I think is a good idea as well. So, okay, any other questions about page 6? All right, on page 7, dropping down to here again, we've got the other box, we've got another box for the buyer to sign. FERPTA, there is a lot of confusion on that. If the property is under 300,000 and the buyer is going to occupy it, the exception does apply. If they cannot own or occupy it, say like they're buying a lot out in Rio Rancho for $2,000, then even though it's not 300,000, the exception does not apply because it can't be owner occupied. Okay, dropping down to paragraph 18. It says the party who agrees to pay for the survey or the ILR is responsible for doing so, even if the transaction does not close. So keep that in mind. If the purchase agreement says the buyer's going to pay for an ILR and then it does not go to closing, then that buyer's going to be responsible for the ILR. And I would also be careful if that, sometimes people write in if the seller has an existing ILR, but if it's 7 years or older, I would recommend that you get a new ILR. Because sometimes they add things and they forget they put that patio or the shed out on a slab. So sometimes they forget that things have changed. So I would say get a new ILR if it's more than 7 years old. And then I would, in that next box down there, I would check floodplain designation because there is no charge for that. So go ahead and put that in. Then on dates, this drives me crazy. People put in 14 days from date of acceptance and everybody counts differently. So I think it's better just to have an actual date, say April 15th, 2021, rather than trying to count. Because as I say, everybody counts differently. So I would just say to avoid the confusion, put in actual dates.
Alice, would you check off flagged corners?
Check off what?
Flagged corners, right above it.
I don't know how expensive that would be.
Okay, so that does, in other words, the flood zone designation is included, but the flag corners is not.
No, that would be separate.
Okay.
And I don't know that they put the floodplain designation on it automatically. So I would check that because there's no cost for the designation. All right, any questions about page 7?
So I'm looking at number 18, it says surveys or improvement look for the ILR. Where is that floodplain designation? Because I looked for it and I didn't see it.
Should be in the bottom left-hand corner. And it would just say, this is, oh, you're asking where it is on the purchase agreement or where it is on the?
No, on the purchase agreement, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that would be down there where it said selected ILR or survey to include, flagged corners if located, and then floodplain designation.
Okay, thank you.
There's a box here.
I totally missed that.
And then on the actual ILR, it's usually in the bottom left-hand corner where it'll say this is in flood zone X or something like that is where you'd find it on the actual ILR. Pat.
Just because this happened to me in my last deal very recently, and I was a listing broker, be sure when you get the purchase agreement and you're looking at the dates the other brokers filled out here for inspections, that you really look at those dates, because what happened to me was they were guessing on how long, of course, it's going to take to get inspections done, and then they got it so far out that it was getting so close to closing, and I called back and I said, hey, the inspections are done. I need this to get signed and whatever. And they said, well, we have until, so they're holding firm to the date they put on that piece of
Okay.
paper. So just be sure the dates they're putting aren't too close to the settlement.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it's not coming through? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thanks. We'll have to get it closer. Okay. So let's flip over to page 8. And then what I wanted to mention, we all know that with lead-based paint, the seller cannot accept the purchase agreement until the buyer has read and acknowledged that they've signed the lead-based paint. What people sometimes don't realize is the same applies to PID. A seller cannot accept a contract until that buyer has reviewed and signed the PID paperwork. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, dropping down to E. the septic tank. This, I don't know if this is new, but yeah, I guess it is. The seller shall deliver the existing septic permit to the buyer no later than 5 days from the date of acceptance. I mean, we've had a couple cases where we find out that neither the well nor the septic tank were permitted. So if you are listing a property with a septic tank, make sure you get that at the time you list the property. So 5 days after acceptance. We don't want to miss that. Here again, that's a seller shall deliver. So if you don't deliver it, that could be considered a default. All right, solar panels. We've talked this till we're blue in the face, but there is a contingency in MAR form 5125 is the solar panel contingency. And then there's also the information sheet. So if there are solar panels, you want to make sure that those forms are given to the buyer. All right, any questions about page 8? All right. Page 9.
Alice, sorry, Alice, on H, the solar panel one. Is this the one you were talking about earlier that like they should sign 5125 but like and get it in with the offer, or how do you recommend? I know obviously they need to sign it and have it on the file, but is that something prior to offer that we should have them signing, similar to lead-based paint, or like how do you suggest dealing with that?
I would.
Now you have me terrified of solar.
Yeah, I would give them the paperwork. I would say you don't have to submit it to the seller or to the listing broker at the time you write it, but I would give this information to them up front.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, on page 9, this is, we now have a new seller's disclosure that's not called seller's disclosure anymore. It is called, it's a statement of adverse material facts, and we can now start using it. Ashley Strauss Martin sent it out last Friday, and I think I always find people go ahead and use it because it's easier, and I think it's going to make our lives better. And it's just adverse material facts that they need to disclose. Any questions, Jenny? Pat, could you give Jenny the mic?
Do we know yet if when it gets uploaded into DocuSign that they'll be able to do that electronically, or is that something they're going to have to write? Because they're little paragraphs. There's no check boxes anymore. Will they be able to do that electronically, fill that in?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that either, Alice.
What, Marie?
I don't know that either.
You'll be able to do it. That's an option. I'm actually going to load it in .loop. We're still using .loop. I'm going to load it in ours, and you can do basically a paragraph type thing, just open-ended box, and that should be that's the same in DocuSign. They can do it.
Okay, perfect. That'll make it easier. It's supposed to be in the forms. Tigo, did you say it is in .loop?
No, I'm going to put it in
okay.
On ours, just on our team, because we have a team account, so we can all use it. But Ashley said end of the month they should be at the 3 transaction desks, .loop and DocuSign.
Okay. So what I've been telling people, you can go ahead, Joseph. Oh, what I've told people is they can go ahead and use it because I think people are just waiting to get it. So I'm saying, yeah, go ahead. We've got it now, but
we just got one, right, Andrew? We just got or what are you writing up an offer, and it came in, the listing had it on it already. That was just like an hour ago.
Wow. Okay.
Somebody's already using it.
Is it form 1110? Is that the one we're talking about?
Yes, that is.
Yeah, it's in .loop. I just pulled it up.
It's not in Instinet.
Okay, so we're just, as of today, it is in .loop. Or did you say DocuSign or .loop?
.loop.
It's in .loop and in Instinet.
No, it's not in
Look right now.
Oh, it's not in Instinet?
No, I mean, I was just looking.
Okay.
.loop's been the winner the last few times.
I know.
I know.
There you go.
I guess that's because we're not using it anymore. They make it convenient. So, Okay, so then,
Alice, I got a quick
yes,
question for you.
absolutely.
On the documents deadline, it's still labeled as seller's property disclosure, but the form is changing from property disclosure to statement of adverse material facts. Well, on the purchase agreement, if it says property disclosure, is that going to change to statement of adverse material facts, or are we still going to act as if, oh, it's still going to be called the property seller disclosure?
I'll ask Ashley about that.
Okay.
I've got an email to her this morning anyway, so
Okay. Cool.
I'll ask her about that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, then moving on to paragraph 21.
Can I just, I don't know who said that.
That
Who
was
just,
Joseph.
Joseph? That just, I'm going to call Richard at the MLS right now because we got to change that in MLS because right now it says property disclosure in the documents. I'm going to do that immediately. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tigo, for talking to Richard too. Okay, so paragraph 21, it says that last sentence, by entering into this agreement, buyer represents he is satisfied with the neighborhood and surrounding areas and agrees that any issue regarding the surrounding area will not serve as grounds for termination. So what I suggest telling buyers is go by the house various times a day. Go by, if it's near a school, make sure at 3 o'clock that you can handle the noise. If it's another area where, at night, everybody's home and there are 4 or 5 cars in the yard, then that's something you need to know before you move in. So that is something that they need to take responsibility for. Sarah. Sarah's question was if they're out of state and they haven't seen it personally. I don't know. I think that puts a lot of liability on you. So I would recommend, we don't want to drive by for them. That makes more liability for us. But I would definitely do that INMAR form that says they have not seen the property yet. Right. Because we had a situation just this week where somebody was buying it sight unseen. And then when they came, they thought the house looked older than what they thought it would be. And that wasn't a reason to get out of the contract, just because they didn't like, the way it looked. So, okay, moving down to 22 III, it says that square footage, if square footage is a material matter to the buyer shall investigate the square footage during the inspection period. We just talked about this a little bit earlier, and there's another box for the buyer to sign. So you cannot wait till you get the appraisal to argue about the square footage. Dropping down to B, 22, it says this is in bold, so keep in mind that it's important. The buyer and the buyer's agents are not permitted on the property without prior notification to and approval by seller or seller's broker. So we had one buyer who would go by, the house was vacant, but the neighbors were checking on the house, and this buyer would go by, several times during the day to do things, or at night he was there a couple times. And so the seller and the seller's broker said, hey, you're not giving us notice. You need to give notice. Also, sometimes we schedule the inspections, but we forget to tell the seller when the inspections are going to happen. So you've got to let the selling broker know and the buyer. Then another situation we had the other day, we had out-of-state buyers, and I told our buyer broker, do not go to those inspections and be the eyes and ears for that seller. If they have another friend who lives here, let them go. Otherwise, they're just going to need to get the written report. We do not want that added liability. Okay. Dropping down to utilities. If utilities are on as of the date of acceptance, the seller shall maintain the utilities through possession. We've had people who they think it's going to close, so they go ahead and turn off the utilities, and then it freezes, the pipes break, we get floods. So it's very, very critical if you're representing the seller that they keep those utilities in until it's out of their name. And then I always tell the buyers, you need to go and get it transferred. It's much better for a buyer to pay a couple days of utilities than to have those utilities turned off. So,
Hey, Alice.
Yes.
DocuSign has the adverse material in it.
Wow.
I know,
DocuSign has the adverse material form.
but Instinet does not.
Pardon me?
Instinet does not.
Okay, so Dotloop and DocuSign have it. Instinet does not. That's ironic because Instinet's the one that's run by GAR and Inmar. So, okay, paragraph or page 9. Anybody have any questions? On the top of page 10, the only inspections you would put in there would be the ones that you expect the seller to pay for. Otherwise, it's going to be blank. And then that next line, it says the party who has agreed to pay for the inspection shall do so, even if this transaction does not close. And I think a lot of inspectors are asking for payment up front, so that would take care of that. So, okay, inspection deadlines, here again, I think it's better to put actual dates rather than put in 14 days or whatever from date of acceptance. Then waiver of inspections, we've had, yeah. Okay. Joseph, could you give that back to Jenny?
So on this inspect date of acceptance under delivery deadline, it's saying this delivery deadline applies only if the seller is responsible for delivering the report. So if that's not the case, what do you recommend with this blank here?
Okay, so if the buyer's responsible for ordering the inspections and they don't do it in a timely manner, then it's not the seller's fault. I mean, this is just saying if the seller is responsible for ordering those inspections and it doesn't get done, then it's an issue. But if the buyer doesn't get them ordered in time, then it's not the liability or responsibility of the seller. Okay, waiver of inspections, I would say never, ever, ever check this box. The only time in the world you would ever want to do that is if they're going to tear down the house and they're buying it for the lot. But otherwise, we want somebody to do inspections on that property. And here again, buyer's box over there. Objection resolution. We just had this week too, where a real estate company out in Placitas, that I won't mention their name, sent the entire inspection to our listing broker. So then the dilemma is, so the listing broker calls me and says, should I open it? And she ended up sending an email to Ashley Strauss Martin, and Ashley Strauss Martin says, even if you don't open it, the fact that you got it, we need to disclose it. So be really, really careful and only send those portions of the inspection for which you are objecting. Okay. And then I guess this realtor and her QB on the other side was like, well, you know, we didn't know that. It's like, it's in here. Have you considered reading the document? So
I always tell the other side, please, even before they've done the inspections, remember, only send me per purchase agreement, only send me the sections that you're objecting to, just to remind them.
Right, right. Because sometimes people say, well, I don't know how to cut and paste it. Well, figure it out. Jeez. So, because you can, this could be an issue for your buyer. I mean, if you send out a whole report, that's a concern for the buyer. He could be in breach of this contract. So be really, really careful. Now, on another note, the seller can ask for that entire inspection in writing. So sometimes buyers will say, I paid for this. I don't want the seller to have it. However, if they ask for it in writing, you need to give it to them, the entire report. That'd be the only time you give them the entire report, is if they ask for it in writing. All right, any questions about that? Another thing that in HI and then the B, it says seller may not terminate this agreement based on the fact that the buyer made an objections. So sometimes, especially in the market we have now, sellers will say, well, if you don't like my house, or, you know, I'm not going to do any repair, I'll just put it back on the market. I'll terminate and put it back on the market. That is not the seller's choice to terminate. Only the buyer can terminate. So dropping down to that C, where there's that blank there, I would put in that you want the repairs done 3 days prior to settlement, because you're going to be doing a walkthrough 2 days prior to. So You want the repairs done before you do the walkthrough. If you're representing the buyer, make sure you get the inspector out to re-inspect. So sometimes you'll have the seller up on the roof slopping tar, and then they come out and do a re-inspection and it doesn't pass. So you want to make sure that always say that you want a licensed professional to do the repair work. You don't want the seller, getting up there on the roof and putting on tar. Jenny?
I would also say, even if the seller is a licensed contractor, like they have their general contractor license, to have a third party do, because I just had issues. The seller thought he could do everything because he was a licensed contractor, but you're still biased,
right,
when you're the seller.
Right. Yeah. Okay. What Jenny said is, even if the seller happens to be a licensed contractor, have somebody else do the work. So, okay. Any questions about page 10?
Alice?
Yeah.
Before you move on, you said that the buyer can request the entire inspection report, but does he need to, excuse me?
The seller can. Yeah, the buyer has the inspection, but if the seller asks for it in writing, then you need to give that report to the seller.
Is that required?
If they ask for it in writing, yes.
If the seller asks, but there's no form for it, he just has to put it in writing.
Right. Yeah, so he could send a text, he could send an email. As long as it's in writing, he's requesting it.
Okay, thank you.
And sometimes.
Can I add something to that, Alice?
Yeah, go right ahead, Tigo.
Well, it's sometimes we get the request from the listing broker, not the actual seller. And so, those are two different things. And of course, the listing broker isn't a party to the transaction, but they want it just because they want it for whatever reason. And we've had to push back on that because it's like, look, no, we want, if your seller's requesting it, that's fine. I need something in writing, through you from them saying that they want it, or I'm going to be in breach of contract.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Unless that listing broker is an agent. If he is a transaction broker, he cannot talk for that seller. And I would say the majority of all the brokers, especially in this area, are transaction brokers. Joseph?
So one time we had a listing broker that was upset at us for asking her client to send us something in writing. So, I mean, not that that's okay, but would you be okay if I had that liability letter basically sent to them to say, hey, send this to your client for signatures, basically releasing that liability off of us?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you're okay with us doing, to send to them? They sign it, we get it back, then we deliver the inspection?
Yes, that's great. Anything that takes the liability off us, I'm thrilled with.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. No. Jack's question is, if the seller pays for the inspections, and sometimes you'll have sellers say that, no, I paid for this inspection, I have a right to it. No, it doesn't matter who pays for it, unless the seller requests it in writing, he does not get that whole. And like the one we had this week, our listing broker didn't want to see the inspection, and she didn't want the seller to have to, do the repairs or even be aware of it. So yes. So, okay. Any questions about that? Yes. Do you want to get that mic? I think you had to hold it pretty close.
My question is, so what are the repercussions if the buyer's agent does send you the whole report and you don't want to see it, but now you're stuck with it? So how does the buyer or the buyer's broker, how do they take responsibility for it?
Well, the contract says that the buyer would be in breach. So I don't know that's ever been tested in court.
But so what do you do?
Well,
now you're in receipt of that report, no matter what.
What Ashley Strauss Martin said yesterday in response to our listing broker, she said the fact, even if you don't open it, you have it, so you have to give it to the seller at that point. Yeah. So okay, moving on to page 11. There aren't any changes on this particular page. I would just say, as I say, I think it's a good idea to get a home warranty contract. I also think if you've got a listing, it's a great idea to pay, what is it, $50 or $75 to have, $75 to have the seller's coverage during the listing period. It's amazing the water heaters and items that go out during the listing period. So I think it's a well spent $75. And then my understanding is if the buyer purchases a home warranty, you don't even have to pay the $75. Okay, so what Jenny was saying with Old Republic policy warranty, if you go in and change it right before closing, you don't even have to pay the $75. To me, okay, as long as they haven't used it. Okay, to me, it's a no-brainer. Just, have the seller, or that might be something you could tell during, if you're going for a listing, you could say, I will pay for this for you to give you an ease of mind, and you might get the listing over somebody else because this is a value or a benefit you can give to the seller. Sorry, we're off topic. Right, yeah. Or, yeah, I mean, truly, it is a well-spent $75. Okay, then, yes.
What is that? I've never even heard of that, seller's coverage.
It's something that Old Republic has, and what's the other one? American Home Shield? Yes, they both have that. So we do have brochures here.
Okay.
If you want to look at them, they should be in that tech room.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then as far as filling in the blank, paragraph 28, the pre-closing walkthrough, I think you should do it 2 days before. So if there's something that has failed in an inspection, you've got a couple days for the seller to get it remedied before closing. On the next page, the expiration date, dropping down to 33J, says the expiration date means the date the party is revoking his or her offer or counteroffer. Any offer is no longer capable of acceptance after it expires. Consequently, if the party intends to accept the offer or counteroffer, it must be accepted before the expiration date. If a party intends to make a counteroffer, it does not need to be made by the expiration date because a counteroffer serves as both a rejection of the original offer or the counteroffer and as a new offer. So keep that in mind. Some people get real hung up about that expiration date. Well, my expiration died. Well, if you're going to do a counteroffer, that's like a new offer. So at that point, the expiration date is irrelevant. All right, any questions about 12, page 12? All right, moving on. The big one on page 13 is this default, the deadline defaults. Our new form is 2112. And this is where it gives the defaulting party an opportunity to cure whatever they missed. Okay, so say like they had a deadline and they missed it. So what Ashley Strauss Martin has said is if this deadline is missed, then you as the non-defaulting party should do a form 2112 and give them 2 days to cure it. Because her feeling, well, what she said is if you don't give them that extra 2 days, then you can't move forward and say they're in default. So, Amanda, did you have a question? You cannot, you can't say they're in default. You have, this is a brand new form. It's very, very confusing, but you have to give them an opportunity to cure it. Now, the only time this opportunity to cure doesn't work is if with their deadline, with their financing deadline. You can't, if they miss the opportunity to say 2 days before closing, you can't use that here. Any other time you can. Where there is a deadline and where it says the buyer shall or the seller shall, That was when you can use that 2112. It's very, very confusing. All right, any other questions about 13? All right, on page 14, they beefed up the paragraph about force majeure. It does now include pandemics and shutdowns and quarantines. So what you can automatically extend it up to 10 days, and then it could be extended another 30 days. However, if one of the two parties does not want to go beyond the 30 days, then that party has the opportunity to terminate the transaction. And then what we had before was with MFA, the people were working from home, but they were never shut down. So shut down would have to be something catastrophic, I would think. But they have included pandemics here. All right, and then paragraph 14, I'm sorry, page, the one about the buyers, the where they got the little stop sign with the exclamation point. Buyers are encouraged to determine the availability of home and other inspectors the buyer intends to engage prior to entering into this agreement. And somebody told me, I can't remember who, it was a team, that they have a set time every Monday for an inspection. So if they don't have an inspection coming up, then they cancel, but somebody on that team probably does need it. So that might be something to consider. Dana, have you seen that? Or Amanda? Okay.
Hey, you can't be giving away our secrets. Shh.
Okay. Well, actually, it wasn't your team that I was referring to.
That's one of our offer winning strategies.
Right. So it was David Royball's team.
Oh, okay. I think we have two, right?
Yes.
We have two. Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
We have two set aside.
Right.
Boy, you sure jumped up quick there, Tigo.
I know, man. I was like, hey, don't give away the good stuff. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with you guys. You guys can have all the good stuff.
Tigo, I don't know if anybody saw it yesterday. He was on the NAOP panel. He did a fabulous job. So great job, Tigo.
Thank you, Alice. That was fun. That was really fun. It was good.
And it was great information. I mean, one of the things we think, you know, as far as deadlines or things like one of the new home builders was talking about they needed to get tiles delivered, but because it was the orange season, that all the shipping was going to ship oranges and they couldn't get the tiles transported. So, I mean, it's unbelievable the number of things that affect our business and new construction. So anyway, that was, so we're going to have Tigo do a little mini series on a little mini 10-minute recap of what he talked about, because he is the numbers guy. So, okay, so force majeure, it may impact the availability of the home and other inspectors. So as I say, make sure you have, if you know your inspectors 3 weeks out, I would say you're probably going to have to defer to another inspector who may be able to do it in a week and a half or 2 weeks. I think there's a little bit of loosening up with inspections right now. I don't know. Is anybody 3 weeks out? No. Okay. I'm getting no's here in the room. So, okay. So at the moment, it doesn't seem to be the issue it was earlier in the summer. All right. And then if you have any addendums, you want to make sure you check those on this box. So if you've got addendum, check this box, because what happens sometimes, this box doesn't get checked, and for some reason the addendum doesn't get sent through, and the seller doesn't know that the buyer was wanting 3% of their closing costs. So it's very critical to get anything, lead-based paint, the tax survey, the tax levy, any addendums have to be included. And then the well, that's hard to say, escalation clause. Here again, if you're using that, you want to make sure you include that. Okay, expiration of the offer. Don't give somebody 3 hours to respond. I mean, they think, oh, well, I want to get mine in before anybody else's, but you know, you could lose out if you're unreasonable. So I would say give people 24 hours. All right, any questions about that? I think we're going to finish on time. Okay, wire fraud, that's, here again, you want your buyer and seller to initial off on that. And let's see, the obligation or responsibility set forth in the purchase agreement are those of the parties to the purchase agreement and not of the brokers. Okay, so we tend to talk like we're a party to the transaction. We are not. The buyer and seller are the only two parties to the transaction. So we don't want to be parties to the transaction. That's why we have cover page 1, 2, and 3. That is not part of the, that's where it says who's the listing agent or listing broker, who the selling broker is. We are not party to the transaction, so it's in the cover pages before we get to the agreement. All right, and then you want the all the buyers to sign, to print their names and the dates. And then on sellers, you want to make sure you get everybody that's on title to sign off. Because what Ashley has said is if you have a seller that didn't sign your listing agreement, then they probably don't have to pay you a commission. So we want to get paid. We don't do this for fun. So, all right. And then in this crazy market, if you're getting 6 or 7 offers, you want to make sure you get back with those brokers. They've taken a long time to write up the offer. So if the seller is going to reject it, you want to be sure and let them know in writing that, you know, I apologize. Your offer did not get accepted. However, I did show it to the seller. That's what we were finding, is that buyer brokers were thinking that their offer was not presented. So if they get the checkbox back that the seller rejects it, then they know at least they were in the running for it. Okay, any questions? All right. Oh, you're welcome. Good. All right, any questions from Zoom land?
No, just thank you very much.
Oh, you're
Thank you,
welcome.
Alice. Great class.
Sure, absolutely. All
Thank
right.
you.
Any
Yeah, that was
other
awesome.
questions?
Thank you. I saw Tigo yesterday. He was incredible.
Pardon me?
I saw Tigo on the NAOP Zoom yesterday. In fact, the whole program was great, but he was incredible. Thank you, Tigo.
I'm so glad that Tigo also told the world today in the newspaper, it was commented that there are no homes in Albuquerque under 200,000 anymore.
Oh.
Albuquerque is now on the map.
Wow. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Alice.
Thank you,
everybody
Alice.
in the room. It makes it nicer when you can get some feedback back.